Well, it's about time to do another tier list. Since my Primarch tier video was so unifying and really brought the community together, I thought it was time to make my feelings known about the original Space Marine legions of the adeptus astartes. Because Warhammer 40k doesn't have enough tribalism already, let's just throw gasoline right on the fire. Now I will say this right off the bat. Just because I like or don't like a Primarch doesn't mean that I will or won't like a legion. And the criteria for this video is not how large they were, or how much I like their color scheme and how they braid their hair. It's just based on this. Each legion is ranked simply on how badass I feel they were, how effective they were, and you don't have to be my favorite personally to top this list. Nor do I necessarily hate a legion if I put it in suck tier. Okay, so starting out in numerical order with the first legion, the Dark Angels. Now the Dark Angels are one of my favorite factions in Warhammer 40k, and I do love them in the Horus Heresy era as well. Nobody stomped face like the first legion. Space Knights, the first Angels of Death, the cool aesthetic and the monastic vibe with the robes. Yeah, they're awesome. But they got sidelines during the Heresy, infighting amongst themselves. They weren't where they were needed most when they were needed most. They were a force to be reckoned with, and they were all that could stand up to the Rangdan, supposedly. It's tough. I want to put them in S tier, I really do. But the paranoia, the infighting, the secrecy, the whole Freemasonic structure of their order. Yeah, the Warrior Lodges were basically how chaos got in and corrupted the legions, and the Dark Angels were so far beyond that sort of thing already. Circles within circles, secrets within secrets. It's like, hey, Legionnaire, if you can take this next world and force it into compliance in record time, well, you'll get bumped up to OT3 and you'll be one step closer to clear. Yeah, I have a love-hate thing going with the Dark Angels, but I can't grant them the S tier that I want to. In fact, B tier seems appropriate overall. I mean, Luther the Fallen, the Hunt for the Fallen, honestly, it is a lot to put the Imperium through. So yeah, I can't even give them A tier. We're going to go with B, and I can't believe I'm saying that, but yeah, B. Emperor's Children. Well, they really kicked a lot of ass at the Siege of Terra, that's for sure. And their treachery was ruthless at Istvan 3 and Istvan 5. When they started, and they had only a handful of Marines, a couple hundred, they still went out and proved themselves. And they got the Aquila. Nobody else earned the right to bear the Emperor's personal arms. So they were definitely a top tier legion. But were they S or were they A? Gonna have to say A on this one. If they were less high and a little more focused, they could have done a lot more. As much as they accomplished for their side, they could have done so much more. Too bad they were smoking all that Slanesh by the end of the siege, and it was like they got on space meth and didn't care about anything else and turned spacey and unpredictable in the worst ways. You know, since they became pretty much total warp junkies for the Lord of Excess immediately, and since they literally could have taken Terra if they just cared to do it, I have to reevaluate. They're B, just like the Dark Angels. Iron Warriors. Absolute beasts. Best legion of all for the Great Crusade and for the Traitors' cause during the Horus Heresy. The Iron Warriors may not be my favorite faction, and they may just be totally cold-hearted psychopaths, but they are very, very effective. And if Perturabo hadn't have been sidelined during the Siege of Terra, the Traitors definitely would have won. But he'd been treated like less than he was worth one too many times, and he saw the hypocrisy of Horus Lupercal and bounced. But if he'd chosen otherwise, nothing would have been able to remove the Iron Warriors. Between them and the Emperor's Children, the Traitors should have won on Terra, but the Iron Warriors were always the unsung heroes of the Great Crusade. They carved the Imperium out of the galaxy. They spilled all that blood and didn't even get acknowledged for it. So I will say that because of this, I would put the Iron Warriors in S tier, legitimately. The White Scars. The Space Mongols are one of the least understood legions and one that the least is known about. They're definitely effective, but there are things that don't sit too well with me. Half of their legion wanted to join Horus, and the other half was all about waiting for the Khan to tell them which side they'd be on. But let's not judge them on that. They mostly stayed loyal to their cause. If it weren't for the White Scars, in my opinion, the entire Imperium would have fallen. They were the right legion in the right place at the right time to hold the Imperium together. Through counter-assault! I am, as of only recently, as in the last few years, a White Scars fan. I mostly think of Fat Bloke and White Dwarf and his White Scars army back 20 years ago or so, and I tried to paint white back then and had a very, very hard time with it. But the Legion is fully S tier. Honestly, they get so little love in the community, but they're one of the very best. Space Wolves. The Vilca Fenrica. Yeah, they definitely tangled with a lot of enemies in their time. But I think the Space Wolves are a bit overrated. They seem to get distracted a lot, and they were often doing the wrong thing for the right reasons and the right thing for the wrong reasons. Easily manipulated due to their hyperfixation on loyalty, it's actually a liability rather than an asset in a few instances, such as when Horus updated the Space Wolves' orders from "Go fetch Magnus" to "Hey, go end Magnus and his legion for good. Dad said so." I mean, I do love the wolves, I really do. Not fanatically, and I doubt I will ever build an army, but I do fondly remember the first Warhammer 40k codex, and it was Space Wolves in 2nd edition. And they had a model for Layman Russ way back, which was awesome. The wolves are certainly a love 'em or hate 'em kind of legion, but I think they took themselves too seriously. They would never bite the hand that feeds them, but they'd bite any other hand that was around if they were told to, or reacted poorly, or... Do these guys have rabies? Yeah, they also are huge hypocrites towards psychers. But one thing that most people hate, that I actually totally love, are the wolf helmets they got in the Horus Heresy range. Those are actually awesome. I don't care what you say about it. So yeah, the woofs are totally woofy and silly and over the top, but it does work with the whole Viking thing. I feel like I have a lot more feelings about their Primarch than I do about them, but do they have to call everything wolf? Definitely getting docked a tier just for that crap. So they are strong, they kick ass, but sometimes the wrong ass, and for the wrong reasons. I'd love to put them higher, but the Space Wolves are a C tier. They'd be B, but I said I'd dock them for that wolf crap, so that makes them C. People are going to comment, "How can I hate on the Space Wolves like that?" and then type like 5 paragraphs telling me why I'm a dick. Whatever. I love the woofs. Except when they wolf the wolf out of the wolfing wolfness all over the Wolfington during the wolf time if you wolf when I'm wolfing. Not my favorite legion, but would probably be the loyalist army I would build if I were to build a 30k army. The Imperial Fists. Say what you want about Dorn or the Templars or any of the successors, but the Fists are some of the greatest heroes the Imperium of Man ever produced. I got banned from the Warseer message boards in like 2006 for saying the Fists were cowards and that the yellow armor was just an indicator of that. Also that Rackham was going to go out of business for switching to pre-painted plastic minis when they had produced the finest metals in the market. But yeah, I used to hate the Fists passionately. Not so much anymore. Since then, the Horus Heresy series has come out and they are literally the consummate Space Marines. Where the Alpha Legion are spies, and the Dark Angels are knights, and the Ultramarines empire builders, the Fists, they're soldiers. And the finest soldiers. I regret ever hating them. But when I got into 40k, I did Eldar and Chaos armies until 2004. The Imperial armies were all my hated foes, not something I appreciated beyond that. I was very much like Bealtan and Black Legion until then, and that has all taken a long time to wear off. So just for being one of my least favorite legions of all time and now being among my favorite, and just for being absolutely untouchable, and just for Fafnir because I love his character, any of those reasons, they'd be A. But the Fists are all of those, so they get S, and deservedly so. Okay, the Night Lords. They certainly were effective, I'll give them that. They're terrorists though, and terrorists through and through. And I studied counterterrorism in college, so that doesn't sit well with me. But the first thing you learn in the introductory class, Terrorism and Covert Political Warfare, is that one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. Algeria's independence from France is often cited. They gained it through terrorism. But the Night Lords were terrorists on a galactic scale, on a planetary level often. They would kill fewer people, but so horrifically and so gruesomely that it was often worse, more terrifying, and more of a crime than if they just nuked the place. But they were good at what they did. What they did wasn't pretty by any means, but they were great at it. So how do they stack up against the other legions? Well, I don't think they would fare too well in a head-to-head fight with any of the others. That isn't what they're used to. Not that they can't do that, they were after all Space Marines, but the Night Lords were more in their element in a situation like Istvan V's Dropsite Massacre than grinding a frontal assault on the Imperial Palace. I have to note, too, that they were dysfunctional. They didn't get along with their father well, or vice versa, and they didn't really bring much good to the Imperium, or the Crusade, or the Heresy. Now, do I love the faction? Hell yes, I do. They're a lot of fun, and totally evil, and I love that. Unabashedly evil, even without chaos. And that is what makes them great as far as the lore is concerned, and a lot of fun to have in the setting. But they aren't a great legion by any means. I'm going to put the Night Lords right into suck tier. I know, you hate me, and that's okay. Conrad Kurz hated his sons, so it's no biggie. Sometimes a little hate can be a great motivator. Okay, moving on. We are on to the Blood Angels, and they're probably one of the most well-loved legions of all by the fans of both 30k and 40k. I'm no different. My original hated tabletop foe, though. The 9th Legion are more than just space vampires. And I could go on and on about all of that, but you already know where I'm putting them. If you've watched my channel even once, you probably already know that the Blood Angels are S tier. They'd be A, docking them for the Black Rage and all that, except it kicked so much chaos ass at the Siege of Terra, the Blood Angels may have killed a lot of friendlies. But did they totally massacre chaos in a brutal and unexpected way? Yes. Did they show the Blood God himself on his skull throne that they were indeed the more bloodthirsty, crazed killers than even his own World Eaters? Yes. Blood Angels are insanely cool, all around. Their lore is top-notch. The Blood Angels books are all phenomenal, and I want to be Sanguinius when I grow up. Honestly, S++, straight Foxhound on Big Boss extreme difficulty setting. Okay, next up is the Iron Hands. They cut their own dicks off and slap on cyberdongs, so I mean, how great could they be? No, the Iron Hands are actually awesome, and they did kick a lot of ass for the Emperor before Istvan. They certainly got the short end of the stick, and losing Ferris didn't help them, but they did keep harassing the Chaos Forces even after Istvan, after the Legion was shattered, and after they were little more than a shadow of what they'd been. I don't agree with the Iron Hands' methods, and I hate the cult of the Gorgon, like all the secret little cults the Loyalists have going on. Similar to the Warrior Lodges, in my opinion, in that they are the breeding grounds for heresy. But you can't help but feel like they fought as hard as they could, even when they were reduced to a handful of guys. They definitely needed their father around longer, though, to teach them their ways were screwed up and heretical. I won't give them an A tier, but they're better than a C tier. They just didn't really get their chance to shine. So I'm putting the Hands at B tier, and I feel like that's pretty fair. I don't know. They're kind of borderline BC. We'll get back to that at the very end. I'm kind of indecisive. The World Eaters. Now, they can wreck a lot of face, but a coherent, effective legion, they are not. Well, not now. I think Angron and the Butcher's Nails broke them utterly, but the Warhounds were actually once great. As far as warbands go, the World Eaters' Berserkers are insanely powerful foes and are actually tactically harder to deal with than one might initially think. But the Legion as a whole, I don't think it's been something we could consider a galactic threat since the end of the Siege of Terra. They're pretty much ineffective now at a Legion level. I'm going to put the World Eaters at C tier. Okay, the Ultramarines. Well, it's been too many years now that they've been the face of the franchise. I liked the Ultramarines, probably as much as the Dark Angels or the Blood Angels back in like 3rd edition. Blue Space Marines were cool, until Matt Ward happened. It's like if you love blueberry pancakes, but that's all you get to eat now. at least for meals. You can still snack on other foods, but blueberry pancakes are your sustenance now. They are your life and you'll love them. No way. I just can't take it anymore. And I don't ever want blueberry pancakes ever again, if you know what I'm saying. Now, I did even play the Space Marine games, and they were fun. Not really grim or dark, but fun nonetheless. I have a Gilliman and a Calgar from subscribing to Imperium magazine a couple years back, but I still haven't painted them. I think I'm just over them. Of course, in the lore, based on strength, size, capabilities, achievements, they'd be S tier. But Matt Ward, Monarchia, I'd say A tier is generous. I'd love to give them B tier, but they're pretty much perfect, so yeah, A tier for the Ultramarines, reluctantly. Death Guard. The Death Guard are one of my favorite legions, but after the Heresy, I feel like they're a lot like the World Eaters in that they're effectively a legion no more. In the Heresy and the Great Crusade, they were extremely strong and had a reputation of being guys you just don't mess with. Ferrus Manus stated that there's nobody he'd rather have at his side, and nobody he'd hate having to face as much as the Death Guard. But when I think of the ultimate legionnaire of the 14th Legion, I think of Nathaniel Garro, and the Terran-born Death Guard, the ones who were Dusk Raiders before their Primarch was found. That legion is easily A tier, but they started falling apart soon after meeting Mortarion, who ruined much of what they had going for them. Plus, now they smell so bad you really wouldn't want to let them on your ship, or maybe even in your fleet. I'm just going to say C tier is my initial instinct, but back in the Great Crusade, they were the anvil and the Luna Wolves were the hammer on many occasions. So yeah, I'll put them in at B tier. The Thousand Sons. Well, they were always plagued by rampant mutation. They were strong psychers and all that, but effective legion prosecuting the Emperor's will across the stars? That they were not. And then they got turned to dust. I absolutely love the Thousand Sons and their Primarch too, but the Legion is not great and not the most impactful. They always were a tragic tale, but an exemplary fighting force? No. I hate to do this, but the Thousand Sons they're gonna have to go straight into suck tier, which isn't a comment on how cool they are or how much I like them in any way. I love these guys, but they are pretty awful. The Sons of Horus, the Luna Wolves themselves. Absolutely one of the most effective legions of all. The best of the best, honestly. For both sides, they were pretty much the strongest. The strongest when Horus was loyal, and the strongest traitor legion too. Now, they got absolutely destroyed and shattered to near non-existence, and the remnants scattered to the wind. I always thought they became the Black Legion, but then I read the Black Legion book and the Talon of Horus book, and it wasn't exactly like that. It was more like the Legion died, and it was an organ donor, and a Frankenstein needed some parts, so they got used, which is sad. But yeah, it cannot be denied that no other Legion had as much impact on the setting during the Crusade and the Heresy. The Luna Wolves were S tier, the Sons of Horus were S tier, and their death fertilized the ground that the Long War and a 10,000-year threat was birthed from. 16th Legion, S tier, fully. 17th Legion, though. Lorgar's Youth Ministry, or the Word Bearers. They were never great at conquering and then conquering and then conquering. They liked to stick around and make sure that everyone was indoctrinated into their dogma. But before and even after the Heresy, they are all about religion, even beyond war. I mean, if the legions were a D&D party, the Word Bearers are the cleric. And they were supposed to be soldiers, not priests. So I feel like they suck at their jobs, honestly. Lorgar is way, way stronger than people want to give him credit for being. And the Word Bearers are amazingly evil, and I absolutely love them. I mean, they ruined everything, which religion tends to do a lot of the time. But yeah, as a legion, I'm going to put the Word Bearers at C. They're great, but only when they're betraying their brothers and acting treacherously and without honor. But they aren't totally useless. I mean, Istvan V, Koth, etc. They aren't suck tier, but they aren't great either. So yeah, C tier. The Salamanders. The Dragon Warriors of the 18th Legion were very, very strong. One of the best legions in every way. But they trusted the wrong guys, and they got nearly wiped out. I remember that in the oldest lore, only 4 Salamanders and 1 Raven Guard survived Istvan V. Glad they retconned that, and a few more survived. But their legion got destroyed, they got nuked, and they lost nearly every single man they had. And before Vulcan, their Primarch, was found, they would grind away at frontal assault wars of attrition that once caused the Dragon Warriors to suffer an 80% casualty rate. I can't rank them higher than they deserve, even though I have a soft spot for the Salamanders. Now, some Salamanders really did stand out, even in the Heresy, especially the Primarch, but overall, as a legion, they would have been a solid A tier, but getting wiped out because they overtrusted their brothers and got betrayed will definitely cost them a bit. B tier. The Raven Guard. The sons of Corvus Corax suffered a very similar fate to the sons of Manus and Vulcan. One of the legions nearly destroyed completely at Istvan V. They got worked over hard, and their effectiveness got destroyed along with them. They did harass Horus's fleet, and they did what they could, but it wasn't what their full capability would have allowed them to do. The Raven Guard got super depression, like the Iron Hands. They just handled it differently, and they didn't have to also deal with the death of their Primarch. But the attempts to rebuild the Legion all got sabotaged, and even in their resurrection, they were betrayed. Damn you, Alpha Legion! Raven Guard have always been one of my favorite legions, all the way back to the Index Astartes days over 20 years ago. But they, as a legion, were really not in the top tiers. I want to give them a B, but I think I'm going to have to go with C, even though it will cause me a bit of self-loathing to do so, which is appropriate. I have to be as real about this as I can. And last, but definitely not least, we come to my favorite legion of all, the Alpha Legion. Now, this is going to be hard because I am super biased on this one, Hydra Dominatus. But let's put the spycraft aside. They had a much larger legion than they ever revealed, supposedly. They had a much more capable fighting force than they ever revealed, supposedly. At face value, if these things are true, that means they are probably the most effective, most useful legion, the Emperor's contingency plan. But the Ghost Legion may have just been a myth, or exaggerated, we don't really know. Now, when we add in what they accomplished, it was actually incredible. How they infiltrated the solar system during the Horus Heresy was genius. And they have some of the best leaders in the Astartes, all the way down to the squad level. And sorry, Dan Abnett would never reveal a spoiler so massive as verifying the identity of Death Row in an interview at a book signing. That's a misdirection, and almost confirms that it is not who he said it is, just to address the rumors from today. Sorry, saying that it is Ingo Peck for sure, when you know he's got an NDA, that's not hard math to do. So the Alphas did a lot of stuff during the Heresy, and some of it was among the most incredible of accomplishments. They played some weird games and influenced events in subtle ways, but does that earn them a top tier spot? No. Not with the way that they can't be trusted. They betrayed the Imperium, but stayed loyal to the Emperor. They betrayed Horus in the end, refusing his orders. It appears that they are the Emperor's spies and infiltrated the traitors, but had to commit fully to the role. And now they don't remember who they really are or what the original mission was. Like many Soviet spies in the West left behind on the other side, still under deep cover with the nation they worked for no longer existing as they knew it when the Cold War ended. The Alpha Legion fought for the Imperial truth, and that was revealed to be a lie. They fought for the Imperium, but it didn't survive as they knew it, not as the Emperor had envisioned it. So I feel bad for them. I can't put them at S because who knows who they really are loyal to. Are they double agents? No, they're triple agents. Their Legion number, 20? It's 2 X's, a literal double cross. So I did say they are my favorite Legion of all, and there are reasons for that. So I can't put them in suck tier. I'd say that puts them solidly right in the middle. It's either both S and suck, or it's right down the middle. Let's call it B then. Well, that wraps it up. Hopefully this one isn't as divisive as my Primarch tier list video. Oh, yeah. Iron Hands, C tier. Yeah, I mean, if the Raven Guard have to be C tier, so do the Iron Hands. Sorry. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. It's definitely not Ingo Peck, and Hydra Dominatus.